So, if you have any Bibles on your phones, physical, whatever, you can open up to John 13 because that's where we're going to be reading out today. Nate and Britt specifically asked me to open up our first series about friendship, how to be a good friend, how to find real friends in your life. And so I want to start off with asking you a couple questions to digest, to mull over, and to maybe talk about in your group, or even as I'm speaking, just kind of sit and think about these things maybe. Do you yourself find it easy or hard to make friends? Do you have good friends that you think you can tell anything to? And do you think that you yourself are a good friend, or could you be a better friend? See, some of us have a lot of friends, and some of us only have really a handful. When we're young, making friends can sort of come as a default. You have some common interests, you're in the same grade, you like the same sports, and boom, best friends. But as you progress with your friends, are they someone that you can be real with? It's important to have a network, no matter how big or small, of friends in your life to walk with you through those hard moments, through those easy moments, through the thick and the thin. And Jesus himself even had a network of friends in the 12 disciples that he surrounded himself with. And in John 13, we get a glimpse of how important these friends are to him. See, at this point in the story, Jesus knows that these are his last moments before he's going to be arrested and then eventually crucified. And he chooses to spend it with his friends, these same friends that have followed him for about 3 years at this time. So starting in verse 1, it says, "Before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from the world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." See, he loves his friends so much that he chose to spend his last moments with them. His love for his friends comes from the heart of God. It's such a deep love that I can't fathom it, and I don't know if anyone really can process or even just wrap their mind around it. But in his last moments, Jesus models to his friends what it's like to be a good friend. Jumping to verse 4, it says, "So he got up from supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel, and tied it around himself. Next he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and dry them with a towel he tied around them." See, there's a cultural significance that can go over a lot of our heads. I know it went over mine. But many people who traveled in Jesus' time spent their entire time walking. And after years and years of walking in Israel's wilderness, your feet can get pretty disgusting, like really nasty. So typically a very lowly servant would wash the feet of someone before dinner. And Jesus is taking this posture of that servant for his friends. So let me bring you back to the question of, do you yourself think that you're a good friend? You see Christ put himself in a position of a servant. Would you do the same for your friends? See, he modeled what it was like to humble oneself and take a posture of inferiority. He didn't think he was better than any of his friends, and he's really the only one who can make a case that he actually is better than any of his friends. But do you think that you're better than your friends? If you do, maybe you need to do some serious recalibrating, reconfiguring, and center your heart on Christ and center your heart to be more like Christ. I know I'm guilty of believing myself to be, up here and everyone else down here, but God gave me some amazing gifts to use them. But that's just it. They're God's gifts that he's given to me. I don't want to flaunt them for my glory, and I shouldn't. I've done it before, and I'm sure I'll be guilty of doing it again, but that's not what Christ shows us through his actions. See, this act of humility is so countercultural to what was happening at the time and even today. See, imagine, put yourself in the shoes of the disciples, and imagine walking around with the Messiah, right? For years, gaining so much wisdom, and you know this too. You'd think yourself, you'd probably get an inflated head, an inflated ego. You'd think that you're quite smart, smarter than any of the teachers at the time, and maybe even the high priests. But you would be walking around with the greatest teacher in the world, and he has handpicked you to learn directly under him. I bet you'd feel pretty special. But what Jesus does here is model to his disciples a humility that they may have seen as beneath them. Just as Jesus showed his disciples that they weren't special outside of what they could do through him, none of our lives will make any significance outside of what we do for Christ. Some of you know that I used to be a sports writer. I went to school for journalism, got a job in a newspaper in 6 Nations, and I wrote so many articles about sports and athletes. I've interviewed commissioners, I've interviewed athletes who have all done amazing things. I wanted to pursue a career in it and, someday maybe become somebody, right? Like that you watch on Thursday Night Football, or you can watch when you're watching the Blue Jays game, right? I want to be the next Dan Shulman, if you will, if anyone gets that reference. But it was really ultimately an empty endeavor. It was self-righteous, and my wife Hannah, through some time when we initially got married, she helped me center my heart on God and realize how meaningless this lifestyle would be for me. I came to the realization that even if I made it to the very top, was getting paid millions, none of it would matter, right? People would forget me in 100 years, but if I can do my part to help bring people to Christ, that's eternal. So I ended up leaving that job. I started working here for a little bit, and I've been bouncing around a couple of different Christ-centered organizations, and using the gifts that God has given me. See, I realize that I'm a small part, but the only thing that makes me special is the God I serve. So this brings me to my next point about friendship. See, a good friend won't be afraid to correct you when you're wrong. In verse 6 it says, he came to Simon Peter, who asked him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I'm doing you don't realize now, but afterwards you will understand." "You will never wash my feet," Peter said. Jesus replied, "If I don't wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but my hands and my head." "One who is bathed," Jesus told him, "doesn't need to wash anything except his feet, but he is completely clean." So, I love this passage because it just points to the range of emotions that Peter has and just his heart and the heart of an overachiever almost. He goes, "No, Lord, you can't wash my feet. You're so much above me. I should be washing your feet." He goes from that to wash every single inch of me. But Jesus, in his graciousness and patience with Peter, understands where his heart is at. And he wants to correct him in a loving way. See, this whole discussion is meant to bring him closer to God. The friends in our lives are so important when it comes to centering our hearts and our minds on Christ. In the story I told you about me shifting my careers, I mentioned that my wife Hannah played a big part in that by just shifting my heart towards God. And I've had some friends, but ultimately she's my best friend. And she does an incredible job at centering my heart to what matters. See, she's there to support me when I believe I'm living in God's will, and she's just as quick to humble me when I mistake my will for God's will. All of these corrections come from someone who really cares about me, and the same that Christ wants for you. But God also puts people in our lives to help correct us towards Christ. That's where friends come in. Real friends are going to be there for you through anything with grace, and more importantly, to help shift your eyes towards what matters, and that's God. The best friends you could ever have are the ones that care enough about you to tell you what they're feeling, and especially if they think you're wrong. You shouldn't have a good friend that's going to tell you everything you're going to want to hear ever, right? Everything that, just to inflate your ego and boost it. You don't want those friends in your life. See, I've recently started to become pretty good friends with this guy named Noah. You might know him. He leads worship. He was over here playing guitar, and he's quite handsome. And so, see, we're both guys relatively new to this area. I moved here about 3 years ago, and he moved here last year. We have pretty similar interests, we're in similar stages of life, and we've connected on this, but we are also wanting to be very intentional about growing together. We try to share how we feel in the spirit of correction, and I honestly can say that we've grown a lot together in that short time. He compliments my areas of weakness, and I compliment his. We're able to uplift each other to not just be better people, but to be more Christ-like. It took me years to find a relationship with another guy like this. In fact, about 24 years to find a relationship with another guy like this. And now, over this past little bit, I've created a network of some amazing guys. Some of them in this room and some of them outside of the church as well. And they speak truth to me. Now, can you honestly say that you have that same relationship with your friends? Is that something that maybe you need to address? See, a friend can give you an outside perspective when we're really consumed by our own egos, and we're all guilty of it. When we're looking for friendship, we need to be in a space to properly serve and correct our friends like Christ, but also humbly learn how to take correction like Peter. Nobody is perfect, which means there's always going to be things to correct in ourselves and each other. We should yearn for these friendships because they will ultimately bring us closer to Christ. Being a good friend means to serve your friends the way Christ served his disciples, and there's no shame in making the first move. Ask questions to them, to how could you be better, or how can you help them to be better? How are you doing? How can I be praying for you? This gives a space for people to be vulnerable and open. I'm especially talking to the young guys here. So many times we buy into the idea of burying our emotions and not talking about those negative feelings when they come your way, other than anger, of course. See, I know because I was that person. What I found that's helped me the best is to have those friendships and those relationships and that network of guys and mentors in my life who have always had a rock-solid faith that I can come back to. Your friends can be a great resource to help you through life, but more importantly, they'll bring you closer to God. If you be that friend to others, you will find others to be that friend to you. And on that note, I'm going to pray. I'm going to bring Nate back up wherever he is. I don't know if, there he is, okay. So I'll just pray for you guys before you head out, and I'll pass it off to Nate. Lord, thank you for this group of youth as we've come together to learn and to ultimately honor you, God. I pray that as they go away for their group time, they're going to take some serious heart recalibration and just maybe, take inventory of their life and their relationships that they built and know and wonder if they're honoring to you, God. I pray for the leaders that you give them wisdom as they walk through this, and I pray for every single one of the youth here as they build that network around them if they don't have it already, God. And if those that do, that they may strengthen it. I bless this time and I put it into your hands, God, and I pray this in your name. Amen.